Tonight we travel far, across the sands of time, to the banks of a sacred river, under a burning sky. Welcome to ancient Egypt, land of towering pyramids, watchful gods, and days so hot they could melt the courage from your bones. But don't be fooled by the gold masks or the grand temples. Beneath the glamour lies something else, something harsher, something real. So take a breath, dim the lights, let your mind begin to drift. Imagine, before you even open your eyes, the sun is already pouring through your walls of reeds. No curtains, no shutters, just dry wind and heat, greeting you like an uninvited guest. Your bed, a simple straw mat. Your sheet, a whisper of linen, more symbol than shelter. That gentle Nile breeze you saw in travel shows, gone, probably vanished sometime around 2800 BC, and it's not even mid-morning. Yet already, the temperature hovers near 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or 32 degrees Celsius. Your linen tunic clings to your body like wet paper, offering no defense against the burning sky. Forget sunscreen, forget shade, forget hats with funny logos. The rich might have oils. You, maybe, if you're lucky, a bit of mud, or crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung, a desperate attempt to not become a walking ember. By midday, the stones beneath your feet are hotter than a cook's hearth, shade is scarce, trees are rare, you huddle beside a mud brick wall, but even the wall seems to be sweating with you. And yet, you mustn't complain, because Ra, the sun god, is watching. And if the heat is unbearable, well, that only means Ra is strong today. A divine compliment, if you will. To survive just one day here, you'll need water, humility, and a high tolerance for slow roasting. And this is just your morning. You rise, your limbs heavy from heat, your throat already dry. But nearby lies salvation, the Nile. You step outside, and even before you reach it, you can smell it. That sacred river, giver of life. Today smells a bit like a fish market. After a bad day, flies buzz, frogs croak, odd creatures skitter on legs they shouldn't have. And yet, this is where you must bathe. There is no soap. Not really. Instead, you rub your skin with sand, coarse, warm, rough. Nature's exfoliant. Not exactly refreshing, but it works, sort of. Laundry? Also done here, by beating clothes on rocks and praying crocodiles are elsewhere. The water isn't clean, it isn't private, but it's all there is. And still, you scrub, you rinse, you emerge, slightly cleaner, moderately more worried about leeches. If you live in Memphis or Thebes, you might find a public basin, a luxury for city folk. But for most, it's Nile or nothing. Families, neighbors, livestock, and the occasional curious ibis all share the space. You fill clay jars, balance them carefully on your head, and walk back to your small home before the sun turns the walls to toast. It's a daily ritual, spiritual, necessary, and just a little traumatic. Yes, the Nile is sacred. It feeds you, cleanses you, quenches your thirst. But let's not pretend it's a crystal clear paradise. It's more like half miracle, half biological gamble, and, well, it's all you've got. So now, you've bathed in crocodile water, scrubbed yourself with desert sand, and your body feels like a dried fig left too long in the sun. Time for breakfast. Let's lower our expectations. There are no eggs, no fruit bowls, and certainly no iced lattes. Breakfast here isn't a delight. It's a strategy, fuel for the day, and little more. You sit, maybe on a small wooden stool, or just crouch in a shadowed corner, And at the center of it all is bread. Tough, gritty, dense enough to use as a doorstop, made from emmer wheat or barley, and baked in clay ovens, the same ovens shared with rats and ash. There's often sand in your bite, not on purpose, just part of the grindstone process. A daily dose of calcium from the desert. And then there's beer. Not cold, not golden, not refreshing. It's thick, cloudy, more like drinking wet cereal, if that cereal had given up on life. Still, it's full of calories. Safe to drink, unlike the Nile. Even children sip it, not to be daring, but because it won't make you sick. Probably. On rare mornings, you might get an onion, or a few dates, if fortune smiled. Fish? Only if someone caught one, and didn't eat it before you woke up. And as you chew your sand-speckled loaf and sip your ancient smoothie, flies gather around like honored guests. To them, you are the buffet. You swat them away, hold your cup close, and try not to think that this is the best meal of your day. Breakfast here isn't about pleasure. It's about survival. Just enough energy to make it, to whatever hardship comes next. And it comes quickly. Time to work. Now. Forget your cubicle. Forget your break room. Forget the comfort of a chair. Work in ancient Egypt is a ritual of pain, a daily pact between you and the sun. If you're a farmer, you're already knee-deep in Nile mud before the sun has fully risen. You pull weeds, you sow barley. An overseer stands nearby, more fond of shouting than helping. Your tools, wooden plows, crude sickles, and your bare, blistered hands. If your back hurts, that's a sign you're doing it right. If you're a laborer, things get biblical. Picture this: hauling stones the size of oxen, up gravel ramps, with nothing but sweat and prayer. No boots, no gloves, just you and gravity. Trip, and it's not just a bruised ankle. It's a shrug from your boss and a long crawl home. Some carved tombs, chiseling through limestone, crafting chambers for those who will rest, far longer than you ever will. But be careful. One mistake in a pharaoh's tomb, and you might become part of the foundation. And women, no less burdened. Grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, raising children, and still working in the fields. Your break might be the baby's nap. 7 minutes, if you're lucky. You cook while walking. You sweat through your tunic. You keep moving. Because here, stopping means falling behind. And falling behind means hunger. There's no end of shift bell, no weekend. Your supervisor is the sun, and only when it vanishes behind the horizon do you shuffle home, dusty, dehydrated, and dreaming of a quieter God. Because here, work doesn't end. It just pauses. And if, by chance, you whisper a complaint, "Why am I doing this? This isn't fair." Careful, words can travel. And in Egypt, your boss isn't just a man, he's a god. And gods don't like backtalk. In ancient Egypt, power isn't just political, it's divine. The pharaoh isn't some fortunate man, born into riches by chance. No, he is Horus on earth, the living embodiment of a god, son of Ra, chosen by the heavens to preserve cosmic order, to guard the balance known as Mat. So, if the river floods kindly this year, thank the pharaoh. If it doesn't, maybe your prayers weren't loud enough. To question his rule is not just disrespectful, it's heresy. Even whispering doubt could earn you shackles, a whipping, or a quiet journey to the afterlife, without your favorite trinkets to keep you company. His face is everywhere, carved in stone, painted on walls, stamped into bread molds. You chant his name during rituals, see his image painted larger than all others. That's not ego, it's law. But you'll likely never see him. Not really. If you're a commoner, the closest you'll get is glimpsing a golden boat float past during a festival. Blink, and he's gone. Back behind palace gates, you'll never cross. Guarded, adorned, surrounded by more gold than your village has grain. If you work on a royal site, a tomb, a temple, a statue the size of a mountain, you do it with joy. At least, that's the official story, and you repeat it, over and over, because pretending it's an honor is safer than saying how your body feels after 14 hours of chiseling stone. Don't even dream of rebellion. Pharaohs end uprisings before the word resistance finishes leaving your lips. Ask the last village that held back taxes. Oh wait, you can't. It doesn't exist anymore. So yes, the pharaoh is divine. And you're fortunate just to sweat in his name. Now, let's talk about sand. Because in ancient Egypt, sand is not a nuisance. It's a lifestyle. It's your roommate, your coworker, your seasoning, and sometimes your mortal enemy. It's in your clothes, in your bed, in your food, in places you didn't know existed. You wear linen, light, breathable, and utterly useless against the creeping fingers of sand. It slips through the fabric, clings to your skin, and finds every hidden fold of your body. Eating? Prepare for crunch. Your bread is half grain, half gravel. Flour is ground between stone slabs, and little bits of rock make it into every bite. Egyptians didn't just eat wheat, they ate their tools. That's why archaeologists often find teeth, as flat as river pebbles. Imagine grinding your breakfast and your molars at the same time, every single day. Even your home offers no relief. Mud brick walls have cracks, crevices, and windows with no glass. Perfect portals for sand to drift in. Your floor is coated, your pots are dusty, your bed, a desert in disguise. Most walk barefoot, each step shaping your feet into something between callus and sandal. If you do have shoes, they're woven from reeds. Fashionable perhaps, but protective? Not even slightly. And then there are sandstorms. Sudden, violent, unforgiving. 1 minute, you're chatting peacefully. The next, you're coughing dust and blinking through an airborne avalanche. Visibility, gone. Everyone around you reduced to blurry silhouettes, struggling to breathe. In short, sand is a quiet invader, always there, always waiting. You can't escape it, and you can't wash it off. You tried. The Nile just added more. Religion in ancient Egypt isn't a weekend ritual. It's the foundation of everything. Your work, your food, your hygiene, even your sleep, all orchestrated by a pantheon of gods and goddesses with very specific preferences. Your town has temples for many deities, each ruling a different part of your life. Ra, who sails the sun across the sky. Thoth, the wise one, keeper of time and scribes. Sobek, half crocodile, half nightmare, protector of the river. And Bastet, the cat goddess, who somehow runs your PR. Forget personal freedom, your schedule, your thoughts, even your meal times, all orbit around the gods. You wake, you thank Ra for the sunrise, spill a few drops of beer in honor of Hathor, and if you stub your toe, you whisper a curse under your breath, careful not to attract a lingering spirit with unfinished business. Before you eat, you offer a small piece of food. Before you sleep, you whisper a prayer, asking Set, the god of chaos, to please leave your house untouched, at least for tonight. Even funerals aren't simple. They stretch for days. The dead don't just pass on. They must be tested. They must avoid demons and prove that their soul was clean. Only then can they hope for peace. When you die, your heart is weighed against a feather, not metaphorically, literally. If your heart is heavier because of cruelty, deceit, or perhaps stealing a goat, you don't get a second chance. You're devoured by Amit, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the legs of something pulled from your worst dream. So even in death, you're on probation. But here's the twist. This wasn't depressing to the Egyptians. Not at all. It was reassuring. They believed life was part of a balance, a rhythm. If you followed ritual, if you lived with truth, with order, you could reach an eternity of peace, of warmth, of family, of food, maybe even a boat. Of course, the more wealth you had, the more the gods noticed you. Temples were massive, priests held real power, and peasants just hoped the gods were in a generous mood that day. Because here, faith isn't a choice. It's your job description, your insurance plan, your ticket to whatever comes next. So, you've stepped on something sharp, or maybe been bitten, or worse, you caught something strange and contagious, which, in ancient Egypt, is just another Tuesday. Time to see a healer. But don't expect clean rooms or soft lighting. You're about to be treated with spells, herbs, and a healthy amount of optimism. Doctors did exist, and they were advanced for their time. They had tools, scrolls, a decent grasp of anatomy. But medicine was always part science and part magic. You might be given a poultice, honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Odd as it sounds, it helps. Honey is antibacterial. Mold, early penicillin. So yes, it works. Mostly. But before it's applied, the healer murmurs a spell, just in case your stomach cramps are from a ghost or an offended deity. Headache? You'll have onions rubbed into your scalp while a hymn is chanted. Chest pain? A mixture of cow dung and dates might do the trick. Maybe. Eye infection? There's a paste, lizard blood, ochre, and beer, plus a blessing to Horus. Surgery? It happens. Abscesses drained, broken bones reset, wounds stitched with linen thread. But there's no anesthesia, just a sharp knife, and a friend to hold your arms as you scream into a mud brick pillow. Toothbrush? Let's not. All that sand in the bread has already ground your teeth flat by your 20s. If one gets infected, you have 3 options. Live with it, die from it, or have it yanked out with pliers forged by a blacksmith on a bad day. And of course, you're given an amulet, always, for childbirth, for stitches, even for a loud sneeze. Because maybe, just maybe, there's a serpent spirit wrapped around your spleen. So yes, Egyptian medicine had its strengths, but mostly, your bandage was a prayer. Here's something unexpected. Ancient Egyptian women had more rights than many women centuries later. They could own land, run shops, divorce their husbands, even sue them. Sounds progressive, but slow down. Before you pack your bags for a time-traveling feminist vacation, let's look closer. Because while the law may have recognized you, life didn't always cooperate. If you're a woman here, your day starts before the sun. You grind grain by hand, with a stone that wears down your wheat and your spine. Then, you haul water from the river. You cook, care for children, manage the household, tend animals, and yes, sometimes help in the fields. You're not multitasking. You are the task. There's no rest, no break, no concept of me time. Childbirth? Risky, painful, sacred, and dangerous. Midwives help. But there are no anesthetics, no sterile rooms, no gentle harps playing in the background. You give birth in a hot, smoky room, with prayers in the air and sweat on your skin. And fashion? You wear linen. It breathes. It moves. But there's no underwear, no shoes, and not much privacy. The sun burns your skin. The sand finds every seam in your clothing. And the insects, they treat you like a free buffet. Want makeup? You can have some. But the eyeliner is made with lead and applied using sticks that look suspiciously like sharpened twigs. It's beauty with consequences. If you were born into wealth, life feels different. You might learn to read, keep estate records, or even serve as a priestess. And if you're truly privileged, truly royal, you might become pharaoh yourself. It happened. Think of Hatshepsut. Think of Cleopatra. Brilliant minds, wrapped in flowing linen and intimidating eyeliner. But if you're poor, well, you have rights, yes. But they don't keep your hands from blistering. You work, you sweat, you lift, you give birth, you bury, you endure. You're not bound by chains, just by survival. And still, you have a voice. You can speak in court. You can keep your inheritance. You don't become property when you marry. That matters. Compared to many other ancient cultures, it matters a lot. So yes, Egyptian women had rights. But comfort? That was reserved for stone statues, or graceful goddesses carved into temple walls. Not for the woman elbow-deep in dough while swatting flies off a sticky toddler. At last, you've made it through another day. You ate your coarse bread, hauled your buckets, avoided divine punishment, and maybe escaped a sandstorm. Time to rest, right? Not quite. Because in ancient Egypt, death is where the real challenge begins. It's not an end. It's the start of a long, complex journey through the afterlife. And if you thought your labor overseer was strict, wait until you meet the gods of judgment. Your soul is taken to the hall of Mot. There, you stand before a tribunal, 42 gods and goddesses each waiting to hear your testimony. One by one, you recite your innocence. I did not steal. I did not lie. I did not desire my neighbor's donkey. Each claim, a sacred oath. Each word, a thread between eternal peace and obliteration. Then comes the final test. Your heart, believed to hold your soul, is placed on a scale. Opposite it, a single feather. The feather of Mot, symbol of truth, balance, and cosmic order. If your heart is heavier, weighed down by guilt, violence, or selfishness, that's it. You don't go to prison. You don't get a second chance. You are devoured by Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippo. Entirely final. She doesn't judge. She doesn't forgive. She erases. No afterlife, no dreams, no soul, just silence. And here's the hard part. Even a single wrong phrase, even one forgotten line during your judgment, can seal your fate. The afterlife is an exam you can't afford to fail. But if you do pass, you step into the field of reeds, a perfect version of Egypt. Crops grow endlessly. Boats glide smoothly along still waters. You reunite with loved ones. And finally, you rest. But the path there? Treacherous. That's why Egyptians spent years preparing their tombs, reciting spells, studying the Book of the Dead, a guide for the journey, part prayer, part instruction manual, part cosmic cheat sheet, with reminders like, don't insult the crocodile god, and definitely don't forget your lines, because one misstep and your soul becomes lunch. And now, a small mercy. Linen, breathable, blessed linen. Everyone wears it. Farmers, priests, vendors, nobles, all dressed in this soft, plant-based fabric that allows your skin to breathe under the relentless heat. That is the good news. The rest, not quite as comfortable. Most people wear the same thing each day. Men wear a short kilt or loincloth. Simple, white, utilitarian. Women wear a straight sleeveless linen dress, sometimes with straps, sometimes without. If you're wealthy, your linen might be pleated or beaded, maybe even dyed. But for the rest, plain white or slightly gray, depending on when you last did laundry. Laundry day means hand-scrubbing your clothes by the banks of the Nile, while silently hoping a hippo doesn't rise from the depths mid-rinse. Most people go barefoot. Sandals? They're a luxury, made of woven reeds or leather, worn mostly by priests, or on ceremonial days. For everyone else, expect hot sand between your toes, and the occasional sharp rock reminding you exactly where you live. Yes, there are accessories, but most serve a purpose. Amulets for protection, necklaces to show status, and makeup, not just for beauty. That black eyeliner, made from powdered coal, was believed to reduce sun glare and ward off infections. Even cosmetics had jobs, but the bugs, they don't care. Flies, gnats, mosquitoes. They swarm you as if your linen tunic were an invitation. You walk through your day constantly swatting, dabbing on perfumed oils, and praying that your outfit doesn't cling to your skin like a wet curtain as soon as the sun reaches full power. And your outfit? It doesn't change with the weather, because Egypt doesn't really have seasons, only hot and slightly less hot. So your linen ensemble? It's your year-round uniform, whether it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the sun, or a chilly 70 degrees Fahrenheit at dusk. Yes, Egyptian clothing was light, simple, far more forgiving than the wool and leather the Romans would one day wear. But don't let the flowing tunics fool you. Your life is still weighted with labor, sunlight, sand, and insects that refuse to respect personal space. You've made it through another blistering Egyptian day. You hauled bricks, survived the wind and the grit, and hoped your linen wouldn't tear mid-task. But in ancient Egypt, survival is always temporary, because no matter how strong you are, you probably won't live past 35. Let's break it down. First, you have to survive infancy, which isn't easy. Infant mortality is high, and disease lurks in every breeze. But if you do survive, you're considered an adult by 13. Marriage, labor, parenthood, all begin early, because time is not on your side. You might die from heat stroke or an infected cut, childbirth, or crocodiles, scorpions, or spoiled food. There are no antibiotics, no antiseptics. If you develop a fever, the cure is honey, herbs, and a quiet hope that the gods are feeling merciful. And yet, Egyptians weren't afraid of death. They prepared for it. In fact, they planned for death with more care than most people plan for retirement today. If you had wealth, you commissioned a tomb, an eternal suite carved in stone. You collected goods for your afterlife, jewelry, food, perfumes, figurines, tiny servant dolls called shabtis, little spiritual assistants meant to do your chores while you rest for eternity. Your body is embalmed, wrapped in linen, stuffed with natron salt, and placed carefully into a painted sarcophagus. Beside you, a scroll, the Book of the Dead, not a grim tale, but more like a cosmic guidebook, filled with passwords, prayers, and spells, tips for dodging demons and surviving judgment. But if you're poor, your burial is simpler. A shallow pit in the sand, your body wrapped in whatever fabric your family can spare. Maybe a clay jar placed at your side, then earth and silence. No gold, no murals, no sacred mask, just the desert wind and a quiet hope that you'll still find your way to the field of reeds, a serene, eternal Egypt, where you can farm without sweat, eat without hunger, and sail along a calm Nile, forever bathed in gentle sunlight. So yes, you might die young, but if you lived well, if you honored the gods, if you kept your heart light, you might just earn a peaceful forever. You've made it to the afterlife, or at least, you've been wrapped, blessed, and placed in your tomb. Time to rest? Not exactly, because even in death, peace is not guaranteed. Tombs, you see, are full of treasures, gold amulets, jewelry, perfumed oils, statues, and for pharaohs, literal boatloads of treasure. And where there is treasure, there are thieves. Everything buried with the dead was meant to follow them into eternity. Jewels, oils, tools, loaves of bread, even statues carved in their likeness. But a tomb filled with treasure is also a quiet invitation for someone with a chisel and no reverence. Tomb robbery wasn't rare. It was a recurring problem, a full-time concern for pharaohs and priests alike. They tried to stop it. Tombs were hidden deep in cliffs, sealed behind trapdoors, and covered with terrifying curses. Walls threatened things like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or "May a serpent of fire twist your limbs forever." Did it work? Not really. Grave robbers came anyway. They moved in silence, under cover of night, armed with tools and knowledge. Sometimes they were strangers, other times, locals, and often, they were the very same workers who helped build the tomb. Even priests and guards joined in. The punishment? Severe. Public beatings, mutilation, exile, even death. But when gold is rare and incense more valuable than livestock, the risk seems almost worth it. The dead don't protest, and it wasn't just the pharaohs. Even the simplest graves, a pot of beer, a worn tool, a bit of linen, could be targeted. Food was scarce. Tools were precious. Linen, a kind of currency. The irony? Sometimes tomb robbing wasn't greed. It was hunger. Egypt suffered famines, civil unrest, and foreign invasions. A desperate worker, with starving children, might see a burial offering not as sacred, but as survival. So in ancient Egypt, you weren't safe even in death. Your tomb could be raided, your name erased, your body unwrapped by someone with a pickaxe and empty pockets. Rest in peace, only if no one knows where you're buried. We've all seen them. Those strange, elegant symbols carved into temple walls and tombs. Eyes, birds, snakes, flowers, men walking sideways like they're in a slow-motion dance. Hieroglyphs, ancient Egyptian writing, beautiful and almost impossible to decode. They weren't just decoration. They were a full writing system, with over 700 symbols, and growing. Some symbols meant entire words, others were just sounds, and many were what we call determinatives, visual hints to clarify the meaning. Because apparently, writing the word star with an actual star was just too simple. There were no spaces, no punctuation, no vowels, just flowing rows of glyphs with no clear beginning or end. And they could be written left to right to left, top to bottom. It all depended on the scribe's mood or the layout of the wall. The trick? Look at which way the birds are facing. If they face left, read left. If they face right, read right. Upside down? Good luck. Learning to read and write wasn't for everyone. In fact, only about 1% of the population was literate. If you wanted to join that world, you had to become a scribe. That meant starting young, memorizing hundreds of symbols, copying scrolls until your hand cramped into a permanent claw. But the reward was worth it. Scribes were respected, fed well, and spared the brutal labor of hauling stones in the sun. Instead, They wrote tax records, legal documents, letters, religious texts. They became vital to the empire, quietly powerful, essential, protected. In a world where knowledge was carved into walls and rolled into scrolls, scribes ruled, not from thrones, but from the shadows. For most ancient Egyptians, writing wasn't just a skill, it was magic, literally. To write someone's name was to preserve their soul, to erase it was to erase their existence, completely. So yes, spelling mattered, deeply. Those elegant hieroglyphs weren't just decorations. They were sacred, powerful, mysterious, not emoji, but something far more complex, a puzzle of symbols, myth, math, and meaning. Beautiful to look at, impossible to master, and meant only for the few who dared dedicate their lives to unlocking their secrets. And now, after walking through heat, hunger, sand, ritual, and relentless work, it's time to ask the big question. Would you survive even a single day in ancient Egypt? Let's be honest, probably not. It's tempting to romanticize the ancient world, the golden tombs, the lotus-scented oils, the god-kings, and perfect symmetry. But behind the art, behind the monuments, was a life filled with dust and hardship. A typical day started on a dirt floor, surrounded by smoke, insects, and the need to work or go hungry. You walked barefoot over scorching ground, hauled water, cooked in the open air, shared your space with animals, and the ever-present hum of illness. You worried about bites, about gods, about whether a snake might slip under your mat as you slept. There were no bandages, no medicine, no toothpaste, 2 changes of clothes, if you were lucky. Your land could be taken by a god-king, your soul judged after death. The stakes were endless, the comforts few. And forget the things you take for granted. No antibiotics, no painkillers, no clean water, no privacy, no pause button. Your class at birth, permanent, no second acts, no switching careers, no sabbaticals to find yourself. You were either a laborer, a scribe, a wife, a servant, or gone. And yet, they didn't despair. They believed in beauty, in order, in the gods. They painted, they danced, they told stories, they built monuments meant to touch eternity. Their joy was in the moment, their faith in forever. They didn't just live, they left something behind. You, with your air conditioning, filtered water, and Advil, might not last the first sandstorm, but they lasted millennia. And that might be why we're still whispering their names. Now, far from the Nile, we arrive at another temple, a place carved in stone, but filled with shadows. This is not Egypt. This is Teotihuacan, and one pyramid here refuses to be forgotten. It is not peaceful, not gentle. Its surface is lined with serpents, stone mouths frozen mid-strike, fangs bared, eyes wide. It is the temple of the feathered serpent, not a beacon of hope, but a warning. From the first step, you feel it, that ancient, watchful silence. These carvings were not meant to soothe. They were declarations, symbols of divine anger, of cosmic power, and beneath them, something darker. Archaeologists dug, expecting offerings, incense, pottery, but what they found was different. Over 200 human remains, many decapitated, many bound, arranged not carelessly, but with intention, precision, some with obsidian knives, others with necklaces of teeth or jawbone ornaments. They were not thrown into the dirt. They were placed, each one part of a ritual, a message written in flesh and sealed in silence. It wasn't a grave. It was a transaction, a divine exchange, an offering of life for power. But what kind of belief system justifies that? What kind of God asks for blood? And what kind of world lets it happen? Who demanded so many lives to be taken at once? The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't just a place of prayer. It was theater. It was message. It was power made stone. A monument where rulers blended astronomy, warfare, and blood to keep control over more than 100,000 souls. This wasn't cruelty without meaning. To them, it may have been the price of cosmic balance. So when you stand before that temple now, staring at its open-mouthed stone serpents, you're not just looking at art, not just at architecture. You're staring into the face of a belief system that said the gods required blood, and that it was not just acceptable, but divine to give it. But who were these people? Who had the will and the faith to build such a place, then vanish without a trace? The answer lies in the ancient city of Teotihuacan, before the Aztecs, before the Maya etched calendars into stone. There was this place, a city unlike anything else in the ancient Americas. The Aztecs would later name it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. And when you walk down its vast avenue, lined with towering pyramids, shadows falling long across volcanic stone, you begin to understand why. At its height, around 100 to 250 CE, Teotihuacan was among the largest cities on Earth. Its size rivaled ancient Rome, Alexandria, even Chang'an in China. But what sets it apart is not just its scale. It's that we don't know who built it. No names, no royal inscriptions, no kings carved into stone, not even a word in their own voice. We don't even know what they called themselves. There are no books, no alphabet, no written record. Teotihuacan appears to have been ruled not by a pharaoh, not by a Caesar, but perhaps by a council, a priesthood, or something entirely unfamiliar. And yet, their influence was vast. Artifacts linked to Teotihuacan have been found far away, in Maya cities like Tikal and Copan, in Zapotec centers like Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, ceramic designs, murals and pottery, even political upheaval. Some believe Teotihuacan emissaries helped overthrow local rulers to install more compliant kings. But how did they do it? How did a city without writing project so much power? The answer may be cosmic. Their temples were more than sacred spaces. They were clocks, calendars, messages, structures aligned with the stars, the solstices, the movements of the heavens. Each one a stage for rituals and sacrifices. To remind every citizen that Teotihuacan was not just a city, it was the center of the world. And at that center stood the temple of the feathered serpent. To understand the temple, you must understand its god, the feathered serpent, later known to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl and to the Maya as Kukulkan. But long before that, in Teotihuacan, he was already sacred, already supreme. And yet, what is a feathered serpent? Think of the paradox. A snake slithering through the dust, through caves and underworlds, a symbol of death, of rebirth, of change, and a bird soaring skyward toward the sun, freedom, wind, divine clarity. To combine the two was to hold the axis of life and death, heaven and earth, order and chaos. The feathered serpent was not just a god, he was the bridge. And if you look at the temple, you'll see him everywhere. Dozens of carved heads, wide eyes, bared teeth, headdresses made of stone plumes. Some believe these are images of the god himself. Others say they are high priests or warriors cloaked in his likeness. Either way, they surround you, as if the structure itself is alive, breathing, watching. But the feathered serpent was not just a deity of air and spirit. He was something more, something darker. He was not just a sky god. not merely a symbol. The feathered serpent was deeply, intimately bound to sacrifice. Blood, to the people of Teotihuacan, was not a tragedy. It was fuel, the energy that kept the cosmos alive. Though later cultures would remember Quetzalcoatl as a civilizing, gentle god, here, his role was far darker. He asked not just for maize, not just for incense, but for life. In some ancient stories, he descended into the underworld to gather the bones of the dead and create humanity. But to bring life from death, a trade had to be made. The gods sacrificed themselves for humankind, and in return, humans were expected to do the same. The temple of the feathered serpent wasn't just a shrine, it was an engine. Every stone, every carving, every buried victim was part of a system that linked sky, earth, and underworld. Teotihuacan didn't just worship this god, they embodied his paradox. They lived within his logic, his power, his duality, his hunger, and the temple, for centuries, stood in silence, its true secrets hidden beneath layers of stone. Lost to time, locals whispered, scholars speculated. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that the veil began to lift. Archaeologists broke through, and what they found wasn't just surprising, it was unsettling. Sealed beneath the temple's foundation were pits and chambers, each one filled with human remains. But this was no battlefield, no epidemic site, no random burial. This was ritual. Over 200 young men, most between 15 and 25, carefully arranged. Some had their hands bound, others were decapitated. A few wore necklaces made from human jawbones. Obsidian knives, still sharp, still black as midnight, lay scattered nearby. Tools of sacrifice, still waiting. But it goes deeper than death. The bodies were placed not randomly, but with precision, divided into quadrants, aligned with the cardinal points, as if each death was part of a celestial map, a mirror of the universe. Even the number of victims seemed symbolic. This wasn't punishment. It was ritual, a gift, a bargain between the city and the gods. These weren't prisoners. They were offerings. They died not in disgrace, but in transcendence. To build something sacred, blood was required. Every layer of the temple, every level of stone may have been consecrated with sacrifice. And the deeper you dig, the more bones you find. In one chamber, they uncovered tunnels, filled with mica and liquid mercury, materials linked to the underworld, to reflection, to illusion. The floor shimmered, as if it were a black river, or the sky turned upside down. Was this a passage to the afterlife? A mirror of the cosmos? No one knows. But it feels as if the temple wasn't built on death. It was built to hold it. And the blood? It didn't stain by accident. It was meant to be there. And then there's the structure itself. Look closer. The temple of the feathered serpent doesn't just sit on the land. It aligns with the sky. Teotihuacan was laid out along exact cosmic axes. Its avenue of the dead runs at a 15-degree angle off true north. Not a mistake, but a message. Possibly aligned with the setting of the Pleiades star cluster, or with the sun on certain sacred days. The temple sits directly along this line, locked into a celestial code. But why? Was it for the equinox, the sunrise, the return of Venus, that bright wandering star so sacred to Mesoamerican cultures? Venus was the herald of war, the eye of rebirth, the spark for sacrifice. Its rising meant offerings. Its setting meant flame. Even the temple's dimensions, the steps, the symmetry, the spacing, echo the number 7, the count of visible planets. the divine pattern woven into heaven and stone. There is symmetry, there is rhythm, and there is an astonishing awareness, not just of stone and space, but of time itself. Beneath the temple, in 2003, archaeologists uncovered a tunnel, not crude, not improvised, deliberate, mathematical. The walls had once been covered in powdered pyrite. It shimmered like stars. The tunnel reflected light as if starlight itself had been trapped underground. Mercury pools, micaceous surfaces. The whole passage glimmered like the Milky Way. It wasn't just a path, it was a cosmic corridor. To walk through it was to move through myth, through death, perhaps through rebirth. So maybe this wasn't just a temple. Maybe it was a machine, a mechanism designed to align earth, sky, and spirit, to connect sacrifice to the spinning of the stars. Some scholars believe Teotihuacanos didn't view time as a straight line, but as a circle. Every ritual, every structure, every death, part of an endless cycle. Not once, but forever. Blood fed the soil, so the sun could rise. The temple may have helped predict the heavens, coordinate seasons, and more importantly, know exactly when to offer blood. Because this wasn't just about watching the stars, it was about speaking to them. But this was more than sacred geometry. It was also power. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not only a spiritual beacon, it was a political weapon. Its design, its presence, was meant to intimidate, to dominate. Imagine, you arrive in Teotihuacan, a visitor from a smaller city-state. You walk the Avenue of the Dead. You pass rows of stone, flanked by pyramids taller than dreams. And then, you reach the temple, and you stop. Because there, staring down at you, are stone serpents. Dozens, eyes wide, fangs bared, not a welcome, a warning. Jaguar symbols snarl from the walls. The plaza, once filled with spectators, witnessed not only festivals, but ritual death. Perhaps you watched it happen. Priests in feathered robes and obsidian masks moved like shadows. They danced, they chanted, they drew blood in patterns the stars had already written. It was spectacle, it was theater, and it worked. Because fear is power, and divine fear, that's something else entirely. The rulers of Teotihuacan understood this. They didn't just speak for the gods, they became the medium, the bridge, the enforcers of cosmic law. They alone could summon rain, predict the skies, open the heavens, or call down fire. Even the architecture reinforced the message. From the upper tiers of the temple, rulers stood like silhouettes against the sun. Below them, the people, looking up, at gods, at leaders, at the rituals unfolding like a cosmic script. And outsiders? They didn't need to be conquered. They would return home with stories of stone serpents, of avenues that seemed to stretch forever, of red light and fire in the sky. Teotihuacan didn't need swords. It conquered with symbols, with silence, with sacrifice. At its height, it was the heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city of fire and stone, of order and blood, a place that felt eternal. But around the year 550 CE, something broke. No one knows why. There are no written records, no final message, but something shifted. And then, silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, the kind of silence that still echoes among the serpent heads. The fall of Teotihuacan was not loud, not dramatic, not glorious. It was slow, and then sudden. The signs came first: a long drought, failed crops, tension simmering beneath the cosmic order. What had once been a perfectly balanced system, religion, ritual, rule, began to fracture. And then came the fire. Burn layers now trace the halls of elite residences, temples, even the sacred plaza of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here's the strange part. The lower neighborhoods, the homes of common people, remained untouched. This wasn't an invasion. It was something internal, a revolt, a reckoning. The same people who once watched sacrifices in reverent silence may have turned on their rulers. The temple, once the voice of the gods, was silenced, its sculptures defaced, its walls blackened, its ritual chambers desecrated, and then quiet. Teotihuacan was not abandoned all at once, but it lost its rhythm, its breath. Trade dissolved, art ceased, the rituals stopped, the ruling class vanished, and the temple stopped speaking, but the memory remained. Centuries later, when the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico, they found the ruins. They were struck silent. Who had built this? Why had they left? They called it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. And though they knew nothing of its original creators, they revered it as sacred ground. To them, the temple wasn't a ruin, it was a relic, a truth carved into the earth by hands long vanished. But the irony endures. The most powerful city of its time, with no written record, no final message, no goodbye, just stone and questions and silence, thick as dust. For 1,000 years, the temple lay buried, unseen, unheard. Locals tilled the soil nearby, farmers passed it by, and the serpent waited. Then, in the 20th century, archaeologists returned. They uncovered a city older than the Aztecs, engineered with startling precision. But it wasn't until the 1980s and 2000s that the Temple of the Feathered Serpent began to whisper again. In 2011, a sealed tunnel was opened, blocked nearly 1,800 years earlier, as if someone never wanted it found. Inside, a cosmic corridor, walls lined with pyrite, glimmering like a sky of stars, pools of mercury, obsidian blades, masks of carved wood, statues of jade, shells from distant shores. Not a tomb, but a message, a myth, a secret. Why seal it? Was it a passage, a place of rebirth, an initiation into the sacred? Or was it a vault, built to contain something too powerful to leave behind? Some say the tunnel was symbolic, a womb of creation, a gateway between worlds, a place where gods were made and kings were born. Even the mercury, once feared as toxic, may have symbolized water, or the veil between life and something else. And all throughout it, one figure remains, the feathered serpent. Not just a memory, but a presence, in carvings, in murals, in the temple's design. He didn't vanish. He folded inward, into the bones of the city, waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood. Today, we study the temple with satellites, with radar, with X-rays and drones. We chart its angles, measure its corridors, name its chambers, and still, one truth persists. It keeps secrets. Now, tourists walk its grounds. They take photos. They marvel at the stone. They hear fragments of its story. But the full truth may never be told. Because this temple, this strange, beautiful, unsettling place, was never meant to speak plainly. It was built to whisper, to echo, to survive time without words. A monument not just to faith, but to power, to fear, to blood, and to the idea that some truths are better carved in silence. Children run across the plaza, past the serpent heads, unaware of the stories buried beneath their feet. Stories written not in ink, but in silence and sacrifice. Over 200 lives, offered, arranged, entombed beneath stone and myth. And still, the temple endures. Its legacy is not just architectural, it's psychological, spiritual, cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradox of sky and soil, did not vanish. He transformed, adopted by the Toltecs, reborn by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, not as a god of blood, but as one who brought wisdom, the god who wept for humankind, the one who promised to return. Myths don't die, they evolve, and even now, he lingers, in murals, in literature, in coins, stamps, and the walls of government halls. He became a symbol of mystery, of memory, of something untamed. But the temple also carries a legacy less visible, more difficult. It forces us to ask, how far will we go to feel close to the divine? What happens when faith and power become inseparable? Can beauty coexist with horror? The temple of the feathered serpent isn't just a ruin, it's a mirror, a reflection of us, of our longing, our fear, our astonishing capacity to carve truth into stone and stain it with blood. It reminds us that civilizations can rise to celestial heights while burying their secrets beneath their feet. And maybe that's why we keep returning, not just to visit, but to understand. Because deep down, we know the serpent is still watching, not to strike, but to remind of who we were and what we still might be. And long before there were cities or temples, before pyramids or gods with animal faces, there was rhythm, tens of thousands of years ago, before language, before writing. Humans began to make sound with intention, not speech, not melody, but rhythm. A hand tapping hollow bark, a stick on stone, a foot stomping earth in time, the first drum beat. It wasn't music, it wasn't named, but it felt like something, like movement, like presence, like meaning. Anthropologists have uncovered early percussion instruments, simple tools of wood, hide, and bone, some over 30,000 years old, not toys, not distractions, tools, to summon, to warn, to connect. Imagine it. A tribe spread across forest or valley, and then a single beat echoes through the trees. Danger, celebration, prayer. The drum was an extension of the body, a heartbeat made audible, not just sound, but felt, shared, around fires, beneath stars, in caves where echoes danced on stone. The drum became a language of joy, grief, hope, and ritual. Before flutes, before strings, there was rhythm. No matter where we lived, we found something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment. Because even without words, we had rhythm, and rhythm was everything. In Africa, where some of the world's oldest drums were born, rhythm was not just music, it was spirit. The djembe, carved from a single tree, wrapped in goat skin, held three souls: the tree, the animal, and the hands that shaped it. When played in circles, the drum didn't just accompany ritual, it was the ritual. And some drums could talk. In West Africa, the talking drums mimicked human speech, their pitch and tone carrying messages across miles of forest. Long before phones or radios, we were already drumming births, deaths, and warnings through the land itself. Across the ocean, Native American tribes treated the drum as a living spirit, the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Played in ceremonies to honor ancestors, to heal, or guide the souls of the dead. The powwow drum, played by many hands in a sacred circle, wasn't just music. It was a spiritual engine, a communal pulse. In Australia, Aboriginal people used clapsticks and percussive stomps during Dreamtime rituals, echoes from the mythic era of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans beat frame drums to enter trances, seeking visions and guidance in the long, silent winters. These were not performances. They were survival, memory, belonging. To drum was to remember, to drum was to return, to belong, and always. It was shared, No stages, no scripts, just hands, bodies, breath, sound, a rhythm that synchronized hearts and shaped intention. It didn't matter where on earth you stood. If you heard a drum in the distance, you knew. Something sacred was happening. But rhythm has many faces. Sometimes the drum speaks in celebration, sometimes in command. As civilizations expanded, from tribes to empires, the drum became a tool of control, an instrument of order, a weapon of fear. In ancient China, massive bow drums rippled through the landscape, commanding armies with thunder. One boom, charge; another, retreat. No radios, no words, just signal, and instinct. In Mesopotamia, temple drums summoned crowds, but also echoed through city walls during war. Their deep voice shook more than stone. It shook confidence. In Rome, the tympanum beat in processions and cult rituals, not for battle, but for presence, a symbol of order, of reach, of power. But no army mastered the drum like the Ottomans. Their Metter bands, the world's first military orchestras, were a storm of sound. Davul, coarse, cymbals, horns. Their thunder arrived before the soldiers did. Some enemies froze at the sound alone. Accounts describe soldiers paralyzed before ever seeing a blade. Even off the battlefield, drums declared power. In royal courts across continents, they announced kings, marked coronations, raised hearts, and silenced doubt. To beat a drum was to say, power is here. And yet, even in chains, the drum endured. Enslaved people in the Americas used rhythm to survive, to remember their culture, to communicate secretly, to organize resistance. Even under oppression, the drum refused to be silenced. So whether it signaled divine right, military might, ritual unity, or the flame of rebellion, the drum has always carried a message, sometimes sacred, sometimes terrifying, always felt. Because long before we spoke in syllables, we spoke in sound. And when we needed to reach beyond words, beyond fear, beyond death, we didn't shout, we drummed. This is who rules, this is who marches, and this is the rhythm of power. As civilizations grew outward, spanning oceans, climbing mountains, crossing deserts, their rhythms grew with them. They evolved, changed form, changed meaning, but never lost their pulse. In the East, drums became sacred, precise, spiritual. In the West, they became commanding, loud, orchestral, two worlds, two paths, one heartbeat. In India, the tabla became more than sound. It was conversation. Each strike had a name, a meaning, a syllabic identity. To play tabla was to speak poetry with your hands. The musician became a linguist of rhythm, decades of training for one fluent voice. In Japan, the taiko emerged. Giant drums played in Shinto ritual, in theater, and even in war. To play taiko was not just musical, it was martial, precision, discipline, balance between movement and breath. Its echo through mountain valleys was said to summon the gods and scatter evil. In Indonesia, the kendang led the gamelan, a celestial orchestra of interlocking rhythms, guiding dancers and devotees through ceremonies meant to reflect cosmic harmony. In Europe, drums followed a different rhythm. For much of history, they were tools. They marked time, signaled soldiers, kept order. Not until the Renaissance and Baroque eras did they enter music halls, and even then, they whispered beneath the trumpets. But still, they remained. As discipline, as ceremony, as command. Here we see a divergence, but not a contradiction. The East saw rhythm as breath, meditative, sacred, personal. The West saw rhythm as order, measured, public, powerful. yet both understood its essence. The drum does more than make sound. It shapes time. It connects humans. It transcends language. From mountaintop temples to jungle clearings, from candlelit cathedrals to desert fires, drums have always stood in the place where the human meets the divine. Long before organized religion, there was rhythm. Long before sacred texts, there were sacred beats. In Yoruba traditions, the bata drum spoke to the orishas. Each rhythm was a prayer, a calling. Drummers weren't performers, they were priests. Their hands chanted what words could not. Every beat, a divine invitation. In Hinduism, the god Shiva dances with a small drum, the damaru. It represents the first sound of creation, the pulse of the universe, from silence to form. In Buddhism, soft frame drums guide meditation. Their slow rhythm doesn't awaken, it returns, gently, like a whisper of breath, reminding the soul to come home. Across the Americas, drums are used in vision quests, in sweat lodges, in healing. Their rhythm mimics the womb, steady, warm, enveloping. They guide, they ground, they open doors. The drum is not beside the prayer, it is the prayer. Even in Christianity, where rhythm was once restrained, it found a way. In gospel, the drum became the heartbeat of praise, a reminder of pain, of hope, and the divine rhythm in every voice lifted toward the sky. So whether in war or worship, in ritual or resistance, the drum always speaks, sometimes to gods, sometimes to kings, sometimes to something deep and unspoken inside ourselves. It is breath, it is presence, it is memory. Because when we had no words, we had rhythm, and that rhythm was everything. No matter the god, the faith, or the prayer, the drum was there, not as ornament, not as background, but as a vessel for energy, for intention, for everything we could not put into words. Because when language failed, rhythm remained, and the divine always listened. For thousands of years, drums were solitary. One person, one body, one sound, one purpose. But then came the industrial age. In the chaos of cities, in the echo of factories and theaters, a revolution struck. Drums were no longer scattered. They were united. And so the drum kit was born. It began with necessity. Theater bands needed many drums, but had little room. So, drummers adapted. By 1909, the first foot pedal was patented. A single musician could now control what once took an ensemble. Then came hi-hats, toms, cymbals, cowbells. A symphony beneath 2 hands and 2 feet. The drummer's throne was built. And then came jazz. In smoky clubs, the drum kit began to speak. It wasn't just keeping time. It was telling a story. Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Art Blakey. They made the drum a voice, syncopated, sensitive, alive. Then came rock. The kit grew louder, heavier, wilder. John Bonham, Keith Moon, Neil Peart. The drummer was no longer the background. They were the engine. Today, the drum kit is everywhere. From gospel churches to EDM stages, from garage punk to sold-out tours. Even as digital beats rise, nothing replaces the sweat, the skin, the feel of live drums. A fusion of centuries. One drummer, 10 voices. But beyond the stage, across the globe, the drum takes countless forms, each one a cultural signature, crafted from local materials, played by local hands, steeped in the rhythm of life. In West Africa, the djembe speaks. Its voice, sharp and deep, tells stories, calls ancestors, and gathers communities. Beside it, the dun-dun holds steady, the anchor. Not just a beat, a conversation between the living and the beyond. In the Middle East, the darbuka shimmers, fast, articulate, hypnotic. A goblet drum that leads dancers in ceremonies with pinpoint precision. In Latin America, drums speak of resilience. Congas, bongos, timbales, echoes of Africa, indigenous roots, and colonial fusion. In Cuba, the beta drums chant to the orishas, each rhythm a coded prayer. In Brazil, the surdo and cuica drive samba through streets, protest, and celebration. In India, the mridangam and tabla don't just mark rhythm, they sing, tuned to pitch, carved with meaning. Each finger tap a syllable of sacred time, and then the frame drum, one of the oldest, played with fingers or mallets, from Persian daffs to Irish bodrans, from shamanic rites to folk ballads. Proof that even simplicity can carry the sacred. What unites them all? Purpose. Whether guiding dance, healing wounds, summoning spirits, or leading revolution, each drum reflects the soul of its people. Its rhythm carries geography, memory, and identity. Together they form a global family, a family that doesn't speak one language. It speaks in 1,000 dialects of beat. No matter where you go, the earth still echoes with rhythm. As the 20th century drew to a close, the sound of drums began to change. Not in rhythm, but in texture. The physical gave way to the programmable. The sweaty palms, the wooden sticks, the calloused fingertips began to share space with circuits, pads, and software. The age of digital drums had arrived. It began quietly, in the 1970s. Primitive machines, early analog devices like the Rhythmicon and the Roland CR78. At first, awkward, mechanical. But musicians saw something else. Consistency, possibility, infinity. And then came a revolution. In 1980, Roland released the TR-808, a machine that didn't just make sound, it defined eras. That deep, booming kick, that crisp, synthetic snare, the ghostly clap, from hip-hop to techno, electro to trap. Its pulse built new worlds. It wasn't about mimicking real drums anymore. It was about inventing sound that had never existed. And as digital audio advanced, so did the tools. Electronic drum kits like Roland's V-drums let musicians strike real pads but trigger sounds from galaxies away. Artists could record silently, play without microphones, switch kits with the tap of a finger. Then came DAWs, Ableton, FL Studio, Logic Pro. A laptop became a drum circle, a studio, a universe. Finger drumming on MIDI pads became an art form of its own. Some feared the soul would be lost, that the warmth of a human hand would be replaced by zeros and ones. But that didn't happen. What emerged instead was hybridity. Organic and synthetic merged. Live drums layered with machine grooves. Real players enhanced with triggers and samples. Drums didn't vanish. They evolved. Today, in a bedroom, one person can build a rhythm that once took an entire orchestra. Ancient grooves from Africa, India, the Andes can be sampled, twisted, and reborn on a neon-lit dance floor. The tools have changed, but the purpose, still the same. To move the body, to shape time, to make silence speak across every age, every empire, every upgrade. One truth has never changed. The drum remains our oldest and most enduring voice. From ancient fire circles to sold-out stadiums, from whispered prayers to protest marches, from jungle temples to subway tunnels. The drum has always been more than music. It is connection to ourselves, to each other, to something bigger. And maybe that's why, even before we're born, curled in the safety of the womb, we hear rhythm, that of our mother's heart, steady, safe, alive. And when we're born, we chase it, forever. In moments of grief, we drum to mourn. In moments of ecstasy, we drum to celebrate. The drum is not just ancient, it is eternal. because before we could speak, we could feel. And in that rhythm, we recognized each other, and we remembered we were never alone. And in the quiet spaces in between, we drum to remember who we are. Even now, in an age of satellites, streaming, and silence filled by screens, the drum evolves. You hear it in the handpan melodies of street musicians, echoing softly at city corners. You see it in indigenous communities keeping ancient rhythms alive against all odds. You feel it in stadiums, thousands clapping in sync, united by a single beat. Children still bang pots and pans with instinctual joy, and even artificial intelligence is learning rhythm. But no algorithm can imitate the soul behind a single imperfect beat. Because rhythm is not just counted, it's felt. Maybe that's why the drum has outlived empires, trends, genres, and even war. Because deep down, we all crave something simple, something grounding, the anchor of time, the shared pulse that whispers, "You are here, we are here, now." No matter how advanced our tools become, no matter how virtual our experiences grow, there will always be something profoundly human about. Skin on skin, stick on hide, hand on wood, a beat, a breath, a beginning. The drum is not a relic. It is a reminder that we were always meant to move in rhythm, to listen, to feel, to play. And as long as we exist, the drum will never be silent. Before Manhattan became a forest of glass and steel, it was an island of shadows, not cast by towers, but by church steeples and timber roofs. In the early 1800s, the skyline was humble. The city clung to the island's southern edge, a patchwork of brick and timber, dusty streets, and buildings rarely taller than 5 stories. Not for lack of ambition, but because gravity was still in charge. To build high meant to build heavy, and stone had limits, thick foundations, walls that widened with every floor. More height meant more weight, more cost, less room. So New York grew outward, spreading north, along a grid imagined in 1811, one of the boldest urban blueprints of its time. Beneath it all lay something no one yet understood, a secret, a strength, bedrock, unmoving, unyielding, waiting to hold the weight of dreams. Life in early Manhattan was grounded, sails in the harbor, horses on cobblestones, crowds in the markets. The only things that rose high were churches. Trinity Church, with its spire completed in 1846, was the tallest structure in New York, rising over 280 feet. But that wasn't a skyline. It was a symbol. And yet, somewhere beneath the noise, a vision was forming. A city would rise, not because it wanted to, but because the ground was finally ready. This method, known as steel frame construction, gave architects a new freedom. Now, buildings could climb as high as the frame could bear. Height was no longer a risk. It became a strategy. The technology had arrived. The materials were ready. And Manhattan, with its deep bedrock and booming economy, was the perfect canvas. Its limited geography encouraged vertical thinking. Its financial might demanded visibility. Banks, newspapers, corporations. Everyone wanted their name written into the sky. The elevator made the sky reachable. The steel skeleton made it buildable. Together, they didn't just change architecture. They redefined what a city could be. By the end of the 19th century, New York was done spreading outward. It wanted to rise. The ground was full. The streets were crowded. The only way forward was up. And so, the skyline became a battleground, a war of ambition, of vision, of steel. The first salvos came in the 1890s. In 1890, the New York World Building rose 20 stories over Park Row. Briefly, it was the tallest office building in the world. Then came the Park Row Building in 1899, 391 feet tall. Each tower was more than real estate. It was a declaration. We are the future. And soon, the skyline began to sprout steel giants. In 1908, the Singer Building reached 612 feet, the first to overtake the spire of Trinity Church, which had held the height record for over half a century. But not for long. In 1913, the Woolworth Building took the crown, designed by Cass Gilbert and paid in cash by retail magnate Frank Woolworth. It soared 792 feet, 55 stories. They called it the Cathedral of Commerce. It wasn't just tall, it was majestic. A neo-Gothic sermon in steel and stone. A message that America was no longer just industrial, it was imperial. But these weren't just feats of engineering. They were tools of branding. The skyscraper had become the ultimate billboard. Each tower etched a name into the skyline, permanent, visible, unignorable. Beneath them, the rhythm of progress never stopped. Steam shovels tore into granite. Riveters hammered night and day. Iron workers, many immigrants, balanced on beams hundreds of feet in the air. No harnesses, just courage. The skyline was no longer dream, it was reality. As the 1920s arrived, New York didn't just grow, it began to dance. This was the Art Deco era, a time when height met style. Steel and stone were infused with jazz, with motion, with elegance. And then came the most dazzling of them all, the Chrysler Building. Completed in 1930, it briefly held the world's height record at 1,046 feet. Commissioned by Walter Chrysler, it wasn't just a corporate monument, it was a symphony of design. Its stainless steel spire, assembled in secret, was hoisted into place overnight and shimmered in the sun like a crown. Ornamental eagles, inspired by hood ornaments, jutted from its corners like silent sentinels. Its curves, its chevrons, its machine-age detailing. The Chrysler Building didn't just scrape the sky, it seduced it. But the race wasn't over. Just a few blocks away, another titan was rising. The Empire State Building, completed in 1931 at the height of the Great Depression. It reached 1,250 feet and held the world's height record for nearly 40 years. Built in just 410 days by thousands of workers braving wind, snow, and steel dust. The Empire State Building was more than steel and glass. It was a testament. It was a message. New York endures. While much of the nation wrestled with depression and uncertainty, Manhattan pushed upward. Its buildings, elegant yet imposing, hopeful yet competitive, mirrored the contradictions of the age. Art Deco captured it all. Geometry with grace, modernity laced with myth. Towers that didn't just function, they glowed. At night, they lit the skyline like beacons of ambition. But beneath the shine was purpose. These skyscrapers weren't built by architects alone. They were the dreams of barons, magnates, moguls. They weren't just seeking profit. They sought immortality, a permanent place in the skyline and in history. By the end of the 1930s, Manhattan's silhouette had solidified. The city had become a cathedral of ambition. Its skyline didn't whisper progress, it shouted it. But after World War II, the skyline changed. Gone were the spires, the ornamentation, the romantic flourishes of the Jazz Age. In their place, efficiency. America was now a superpower, and Manhattan, its front office. In 1952, The United Nations headquarters rose along the East River. Glass, steel, straight lines, no gargoyles, no Gothic arches, just an angular box, calm and cold, a monument to diplomacy in the atomic age. Then came the Lever House and the Seagram building. The curtain wall was born, reflective glass sheathing steel skeletons. Minimalism became the message. These buildings didn't sing, they hummed. Gone were the cathedrals of commerce. In their place stood machines, beautiful, precise, authoritative. The Seagram building, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, was especially influential. Its bronze-tinted glass, its rigid grid, its stark plaza, all projected a single feeling: discipline. This was not art, it was command. Midtown soon became the engine room of American capitalism. Banks, law firms, media empires. These buildings didn't compete for beauty. They competed for space, for skyline presence, for dominance. The skyscraper became an anonymous monolith. It reflected the clouds and the ambitions of Wall Street. And yet, even amid all that glass and steel, the skyline still meant something. Only now. It whispered power instead of shouting beauty. By the late 1960s, New York had already become a vertical masterpiece, but it still had room to dream. That dream took shape at the southern tip of Manhattan, where two identical towers would soon rise and change the skyline forever. They were bold, they were stark, they were controversial, they were the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center. Conceived as a hub for global commerce, the World Trade Center wasn't just architectural, it was ideological, a statement of global capitalism, a new temple for trade. Construction began in 1966. To make room, an entire neighborhood was demolished. Radio Row, once a dense working-class district, was cleared from the map. Progress had a price, and the future had arrived. To build the Twin Towers, engineers needed a new kind of foundation. The slurry wall, a revolutionary method that allowed them to carve deep into the riverbed without inviting the Hudson in. It was one of the most complex engineering feats of its time. When the towers were completed in 1973, they weren't universally loved. Some called them sterile, others boxy. They mourned the elegance of older towers, the ornament, the soul. But many saw something else. Presence, unapologetic, confident, commanding. The Twin Towers didn't taper, they didn't shimmer. They stood, side by side, firm, unyielding, twin pillars of certainty. More than just buildings, the World Trade Center became an icon, a symbol of global commerce, of unity, of modern ambition. Tourists ascended to observation decks, dined at windows on the world, stood in the plaza, and stared upward. For nearly 3 decades they anchored the skyline, not with art, but with scale, not with curves, but with clarity. Their absence was unimaginable until it happened. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, the skyline changed, not by design, but by devastation. In less than 2 hours, the towers fell, steel twisted, dust rose, fire consumed, thousands were lost, but more than lives, symbols were lost, commerce, modernity, freedom, dreams. The towers had been visual shorthand for New York itself. Now, there was absence. Photographs felt hollow, postcards felt wrong. Where once the skyline stood with balance, there was a wound. They called it Ground Zero. And for the first time in a century, Manhattan wasn't building up. It was grieving. The city paused. For once, it held its breath. Ironworkers didn't climb. They cleared rubble. Firefighters, volunteers, families, all moved through dust and silence. And slowly, grief became intention. Discussions began. Difficult, emotional, political. Should anything rise again? Could it? What should be remembered, and what reimagined? For years, the space remained open, sacred, quiet. But eventually, steel returned, not to forget, but to build beside memory. And one truth became clear. The skyline was no longer just about progress. It had become a memorial, a silhouette carved not only by triumph, but by tragedy. Still, the city looked up, but this time, not to conquer the clouds, but to honor what had been lost. In 2003, a design by architect Daniel Libeskind was selected, not just for height, but for healing. A new World Trade Center site that would blend memory, light, public space, commerce, hope. It wouldn't be a return. It would be a response. At the center of this plan stood a new tower, One World Trade Center, originally called the Freedom Tower. It would rise from the northwest corner of Ground Zero. Its planned height, 1,776 feet, a number not chosen by engineers, but by history. A nod to the year of American independence. But this wasn't about nationalism. It was about defiance, about the will to rise after falling, to reach again. Construction began in 2006. It climbed slowly, steadily. And in 2014, One World Trade Center opened its doors. It wasn't just the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. It was a statement that even in loss, we build, we remember, we begin again. Clad in shimmering glass, One World Trade Center doesn't try to imitate the past. It offers something else. Reflection, both literal and symbolic. Its surface changes with the sky. It glows. It darkens. It disappears in the light. Presence, without arrogance. Beside it, the 9/11 Memorial opened in 2011. Two deep voids where the original towers once stood, each with a waterfall that never stops. Each name etched in bronze, a whisper made permanent. This isn't just part of the skyline, it's part of the city's soul. It took years to reshape, years of steel, debate, blueprints, and healing. But when it rose again, it didn't just rebuild. New York transformed. It honored the past. It built for the future. And in doing so, it reminded the world of something deeply American and deeply human. You can knock a city down, but you cannot keep it from rising. Today, the Manhattan skyline is more than architecture. It's a living symbol of ambition, of resilience, of the dream that refuses to fade. No other silhouette carries so much memory. You can sketch it with 5 lines, and the world knows exactly what it is. It tells a story of bold engineers, of fearless iron workers, of architects who imagined spires that pierced the clouds, and of immigrants who crossed oceans to help raise them. A story of risk, reward, and constant reinvention. It has never been finished. It never will be. The skyline is alive. In Billionaire's Row, new towers pierce the clouds, slender, dizzying, controversial. In Hudson Yards, glass cities rise where once there were rails. Midtown now reaches west. Downtown still mourns and remembers. The Empire State still glows. The Chrysler still gleams. And One World Trade stands, solemn, proud, unshakable. Because the skyline does more than trace a city's edge. It marks where dreams begin, where fear gives way to courage, where memory stands beside motion, where history lives in steel and glass. More than any statue or monument, it is the skyline that defines New York, not just in form, but in meaning. And maybe that's why, in Manhattan, the sky has never been the limit. It's just the next floor.